It can be difficult when your dog starts getting along in years and a little bit older and approaching or kind of enters into that phase that is the senior dog stage of life. And so it can be a little bit difficult when you reach that stage because you're afraid, oh, it's probably just a matter of time. Like it's pretty soon, we're probably not going to have them anymore. And then it can be just kind of this mindset that you find yourself in. And then maybe you kind of take that and you're like, but I want them to live as long as they can. So I'm going to go online and I'm going to see what you can best do for a senior dog. We want to talk about a lot of those recommendations and how they'll actually do the opposite more often than they'll actually help your dog's situation. And a lot of this is stemmed from old studies back in the 80s, 90s that actually weren't even done on dogs and that were then put onto senior dogs. And so we still have those recommendations being given even today, even though it's really not based on much science or study at all, especially when it comes to dogs specifically. And so what we want to talk about is we want to talk about how can we embrace the senior years of your dog's life? What can we best do to support that stage of life and continue to help them thrive, not just assuming that, oh, it's probably just a matter of time and they're probably on their way out. And a lot of what we're going to say is going to be the opposite of probably what you have read or heard online or maybe even at your veterinarian's office.
So let's start with, when is your dog considered a senior? The conventional definition is that when they have completed 75% of their expected lifespan. I think pretty much everybody knows that small dogs often live longer than large dogs. And so for some of these giant breeds, they are considered seniors at 5. And certainly dogs don't live as long as they used to overall. So small breeds, you might still see some that make it to 17, 18. Large breed dogs or giant breed dogs, it might be 6. They'll be lucky if they make it to 10 kind of thing. And sometimes it's more a matter of, attitude. Like some dogs seem older perhaps. And certainly, not every small dog is going to live a specific length of time. I typically start treating my patients as seniors or as kind of heading into the senior years when they're about 8, 9, 10. I think in veterinary medicine we have some common misconceptions about senior dogs. And so people think about senior dogs as less active, more lethargic. They're not fetching the ball like they used to. They can't go for walks as long. Maybe they have arthritis. Maybe they have failing organ systems. And so, again, those things make them less active. They sleep more. They're not as interested in life. They're not in a phase where they might learn new things or do new activities. Kind of like their athletic days are over. And now their job is just to lay on a dog bed until they finally pass away. So along with that line of thinking, some recommendations have become very common in modern medicine. And so if you look at senior pet foods and look at the ingredients and kind of compare them to pet food recommendations for younger dogs, regular adult dogs, you'll find that the senior foods are lower in protein, lower in fat, higher in fiber. These dogs are often put on some sort of pain-killing medication. Maybe they have arthritis, maybe they might develop arthritis. A lot of times certain drugs are used because the dog might be in pain or maybe it's going to be in pain. Sometimes you see elderly dogs who develop more fear of thunderstorms, more fear of fireworks as they get older, which seems contrary to what it should be. I think that the longer you're alive, you learn that horror movies aren't actually real. And so you'd think for a dog, if they hear a thunderstorm for the 50 millionth time, they should be thinking I know what that is. I've heard that before. And instead, some of these dogs become more anxious, more afraid. So a lot of these dogs are going to end up on some sort of psychotropic drug like trazodone or Prozac or something like that. Gabapentin is commonly used in dogs nowadays. So it, does a little bit of potential pain killing. It also kind of, sedates them a little bit. And so this is kind of commonly what happens with senior dogs and what's expected of them. With dogs, the longer your dog eats a low protein, low fat diet, the less active it's going to continue to be. And so that creates this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, like a catch-22, where you're feeding your dog the lower protein, lower fat food, because that's what veterinary medicine has told us that older dogs need. And that dog will gradually turn more and more into Jell-O if it continues to eat that way, basically.
So the kind of list that Dr. Levy just gave of what is kind of recommended, a lot of it is, that less protein, less fat conversation, which really is kind of just, we feel like this catalyst for helping the decline, right? Helping create this stereotypical senior dog that they're expecting, is based on studies that were done in rats. There was a study done in rats where they were given a lower protein diet, and it helped their kidney function, I think, or lowered kidney
Right, they already
issues.
had kidney disease.
Yes.
And so it helped them.
Yep.
But rats are not carnivores, right? They're quite different from
That
dogs.
is quite different. And so that literally was placed onto senior dogs. And then by 2006, someone actually reevaluated that and started actually looking at it again. And they're like, oh, nope, they actually need more protein, especially from a higher quality animal source. So AKA beef, chicken, turkey, right?
Right, actual meat.
Those types of things. And, the fat conversation is, if a dog has, it is not very active, the concern is that the fat is going to make them overweight. It's going to make them fat. Where the reality is, it's the carbs that make them fat.
Right.
And so think about this, they're put on a lower protein, lower fat, higher fiber, ultra processed kibble, very carb heavy. It literally creates the problem.
Yeah.
It just perpetuates and compounds the problem. And so, then you have on top of that, when you lower that fat, amount, there's fat soluble vitamins they need.
Right.
They're now not able to use, to get enough of those like they should. And so, this is just it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy when you are doing what is kind of recommended. And then you just kind of end up with this cascade of issues. And quite frankly, you're kind of ushering them to the end of their life even, faster than they would have been had you, kind of not done those things.
Right. And some other concepts. So for example, there's this idea that as you get older, your immune system weakens. And I hear that a lot. I hear that said about humans. I hear it said about dogs, as if this is just fact. As you get older, your immune system is weaker, doesn't work as well. And therefore, the conclusion in dogs seems to be, therefore, you need to make sure that your dog gets all their shots, even more into their senior years, because of this weak immune system. And I don't know if the people who say these things understand how vaccines work. You need to have a functional immune system in order to respond appropriately to a vaccine. So giving vaccines to somebody whose immune system supposedly is not working the greatest seems like it's just going to cause more harm than benefit. When dogs become older, of course, a lot of these dogs are just put on pain medications every day for the rest of their life, which is not a good way to live out your life. So using some type of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory, these aspirin-type drugs, it's just not a good recipe for long-term health. Eventually, those drugs will typically eat their way through your intestines. They damage the joints in the long run. They damage the kidneys in the long run. And so, like you were saying, it's just a recipe for, we'll kill them off a little bit sooner kind of thing. the things that are being changed in the diet, so lowering the protein, lowering the fat, is going to have a negative impact on the dog's ability to stay active, the dog's ability to function mentally. And so we're kind of creating this scenario where over time the dog does become more dull, less responsive, less interested in life, less curious about things. And really what we want to do is reverse that. When I was in vet school, granted it was in the 90s, and our dog and cat nutrition lectures were taught by a vet from Science Diet. And even back then, we were told that they had done some study on Labrador retrievers, and they had necropsied them. So they had euthanized them and necropsied them at age 5 and looked at their kidneys. And they found that all these 5-year-old dogs had scars on their kidneys. And the message we were given is that, therefore, every dog over the age of 5 should be on a kidney prescription diet, low protein, low fat, because of the scars in the kidneys. And at the time, I was in vet school, and so they told me this, and I was like, oh, okay, got it. And literally what saved my brain is, as I was walking out the door after that lecture, one of my professors who had sat in on the lecture as well, he was so frustrated that he turned to me and he said, I have scars on my hands, they still work. And I was like, oh, it's like you kind of have to learn that you can think about things differently, and that just because you're being presented with this data means that, just like the study with the rats. The rats with kidney disease, we lowered the protein and the rats did better. It doesn't necessarily translate into what you want to do with your own life or with your dog's life.
So now let's break down what do you actually want to do? And it's really, really just take everything we just talked about and flip it upside down. That's what we're going to tell you, but we're going to walk you through this. So, we want to give our dogs the best chance to have, vital health as long as they possibly can. And we want them to live a long time. And so these are the best ways that we would encourage somebody to really kind of build these into their dog if they're getting into those senior years, or maybe they're already in those senior years. These are some of the things that we would tell you to do. So definitely, when you think about the diet and you look at the antithesis of everything we've talked about, and look at the fact that seniors need more high quality animal protein. They need more good high quality fats from animal sources. Those types of things, guess where you're going to find that? You're going to find that in a balanced raw diet. And so that is just step number 1. They should be having that as their diet and more of it. So you're definitely going to gradually, as you work that, if you're not already feeding a raw diet, obviously you got that step to do first. But once you're there, you're going to typically feed a higher percentage of their body weight per day than you would an average adult. That's maybe, even if it's a, less active senior, they need more resources. So your average adult is going to be anywhere between 1.5% to 3% of their body weight. There's a lot of factors that you take into consideration when you figure that out. A senior dog, we're going to go anywhere between 3 to 6%. And again, there's some factors to take into consideration there, but it is definitely going to be a lot more than your average adult.
Right. So as dogs get older and become maybe extreme seniors, they need more protein in order to maintain muscle mass. The muscle wasting that comes with the low protein diet, or with not increasing the amount of protein when their bodies demand, that sarcopenia, that muscle wasting, leads to all sorts of other follow-up problems that you can avoid just by feeding your dog more protein. And by protein, we're implying the 80-10-10, the raw food, the raw meat in great variety. And to some extent, you have to feed enough so that your senior dog can maintain weight, maintain muscle mass, so that they can do their regular activities. And that is going to kind of determine how much you need to feed them, however much it ends up being.
And a big reason for reduction in this muscle mass, or potential for reduction in this muscle mass, is because their organs do start to decline a little bit. They're going to start to have a little bit more of a difficulty, functioning at that optimal place that
Right.
they did when they were younger. And so when the organs, the internal organs, aren't functioning at that level, it's going to start pulling protein out of the muscle tissue to make up for that loss. So along with feeding more protein, you want to feed more organ as well, or maybe some really good organ supplements along with their raw diet to make sure that those internal systems are supported. That's also going to help them retain that muscle mass a little bit better with all that good protein that you're feeding them.
Yeah, I encourage my clients with older dogs to feed. There's a nice blend that's available. It's made by Oma's Pride. It's their beef organ blend, and it is heart, liver, and kidney. Any dog who develops one of these older age heart murmurs, I would immediately start feeding heart. So you can use that blend. There are plenty of places where you can buy whole hearts. And so I would just add that to the dog's diet. Even if it's just 1 or 2 ounces a day, it will benefit them. The organs that are going to need help, right, are the organs that are dealing with eliminating toxins, keeping the body systems running. So that's why liver and kidney are very important to support as well. So senior dogs also need more dietary fat. I mean, your fat, there's all the fat-soluble vitamins that you were talking about before. Your brain runs on fat. Your nerves are encased in that fatty myelin sheath that enables nerve conduction. Things that you're looking for to add fat in general and fats as a source of essential fatty acids, particularly omega-3s, to the senior dog's diet are going to be things like raw pasture-raised organic eggs, canned sardines. Raw green tripe is huge for them. It is so beneficial. I don't care that it smells bad. Some people have duck fat or beef tallow in their homes, to cook with. Whole milk Greek yogurt, raw goat's milk. Things like those are very effective for dogs. And basically the way you use those, set yourself up on some sort of rotation so that you're not always using the same thing. You could do a week of eggs, a week of sardines, a week of tripe. You could do it that way, or you could change every couple of days. Right now I have 3 different kinds of bone broth and raw goat's milk. And basically I bring them home, I thaw them, and then I freeze them in ice cube trays. And then every evening when I feed my dogs, everybody's gonna get an ice cube of, whatever it is that I'm giving them. So that's kind of an easy way to handle it.
Another really easy way to make sure that they're getting some good fats is really just on the proteins that you choose. So when you're choosing your 80-10-10 blends, to kind of, which is, kind of most of the time is going to be the base of the diet, you're going to pick things that are fattier, like a really good grass-fed beef blend, or, pork is fatty. I think lamb is a little bit higher up there, but kind of really look at those protein blends that are just kind of naturally higher in fat. I think duck is another really good one.
Right.
And so, if I had a senior dog, I would just make sure that, at least half of the protein rotation is going to have some of those higher, higher good fats, which is just, it is not hard to do anyway, because you want to feed a variety of proteins. It just might be a little bit more deliberate about which ones you're choosing to stay a little bit hevier on the fat side.
And it kind of helps remind you to use a variety of proteins. Now you could say, well, but it's an 80-10-10. Isn't 10% of that organs? And just add a little more.
Yep, exactly.
And then as far as exercise, like the saddest thing that I always find is when people come in and say, well, the vet said that he had arthritis, so we quit walking him. No. Motion is lotion. You want your older dog to stay active. Some of it is just going outside and sniffing the sniffs and smelling the smells and reading the pee mail. And, that is what keeps digestion functioning. That's what keeps their brain functioning, is just getting out there, walking the same block. Now, let's say you did stop walking your dog and you're like, well, shoot, now I haven't walked him in a few months. How am I going to start walking him again? Gradually. And so I've had to do this with dogs. Literally, what you do is you get the dog all suited up for going outside, and you go down to the end of your driveway and back, and maybe you do that for a couple of days. And then you go down to the end of your driveway and to the next mailbox and back. And you just gradually increase the distance that you're walking by, even if it's only 20 feet every time, and you can recondition your senior dog.
Something else that you can accomplish kind of at the same time when you do your walks or your outside time and you are trying to get them some exercise is make sure that they get some good contact with untreated grass. When their paws are on the ground like that, there is an electrical exchange between the earth and their body, and it really does a lot to bring down inflammation, help circulation, kind of just brings about help to their overall health. It's referred to as grounding, but that's something that's just very easy to incorporate. And there's a lot of times thrown out there. How long should they be in contact with the ground? Well, the reality is as much as they can be. The more the better. But I mean, I would say at least 20 to 30 minutes a day is recommended. The really cool thing is that if you live in a place like we do in Minnesota, half the year we're stuck inside basically, because it's pretty cold. You can get what are called grounding mats, and they literally they plug into your wall in a certain way, and your animal can just lay right on them. I've put them right in the bottom of my dog's crates before, and they just lay on them when they're in their crates, or if they have a favorite spot they can lay. And it's not quite as good, I don't think, as being in the outside on the ground, but it's definitely better than nothing. And so and they're pretty affordable, they're not very expensive. So grounding is another thing that we would really encourage for people and for animals, but especially seniors when they've got kind of those extra things that might be challenges.
And then take your dog to see the chiropractor or massage therapist. This is something we talk about a lot because we both have experience with doing these things for our dogs. It's unbelievably beneficial. Even if you have an older dog, maybe they were never an athlete, in their active years. Even so, everybody has slipped on the ice at least once. Even just something like going down a flight of stairs and missing a step will rack your body. And so it's worth it for them just to get started with whatever level of care you can afford, whatever the frequency might be. But it's worth doing, at least, if nothing else, at least a couple of times a year. Your dog should see a good massage therapist and have a chiropractic adjustment.
Something else that we would encourage you to do is find little, mental things, mental enrichment for them to do. We don't want to just let them lay around and do nothing. Everything from, yes, the little dog puzzles are fun, right? That you can use with treats, but anything that you can do to really just kind of get them to use their brain a little bit. Also things like sensory walks, getting them to walk on different surfaces and have their, paws touching different things. I mean, if you think about it, when you end up with a senior, if they just lay around all the time, they're really, touching one type of surface. There's something about that contact that affects them neurologically. And so these are just some different things that you can, get a little bit creative, and it doesn't even have to take a lot of time. It can be for 10 minutes a day. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. And then the last thing that we would say, which it should go for every animal, but especially seniors, because they are already, we've talked about how taxed their internal organs are. You really want to watch the toxic chemicals with these guys, because it really is just, they're already in a place where we're trying to alleviate burden, in a lot of decrease inflammation, and those chemicals are all going to really just kind of like fight against those efforts. And so we want to keep things that are, the harsh drugs, the heavy chemicals, all of those things, we want to keep those away from those senior dogs.
There are some supplements that I use specifically for senior dogs, or that I'll start dogs on as soon as they are kind of coming into those senior years. If they don't already have cancer, we would like to prevent that. If they don't already have some chronic illness, we would like to prevent that. And so if they do have those things, we're going to be treating them, hopefully holistically. But if they don't have those issues, we can move into what I think of as proactive prevention mode. So using supplements like collagen, using supplements like medicinal mushrooms. So medicinal mushrooms have direct anti-cancer effects. They provide a whole host of minerals that support the adrenal glands, which are often fatigued in older animals, just the same way that they are in really any age human. But so it supports the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands are what provide us with all sorts of hormones that our body cannot do without. as well as things like cortisol, the flight or fright hormone. That's what enables us to get up out of bed in the morning. And so supporting that is really important. Medicinal mushrooms are a source of beta glucans, which also help us fight cancer. So we get a lot of benefits out of eating them. And then another thing that I typically do for senior dogs is I would just start them on Boswellia. Boswellia is a super safe anti-inflammatory herb that can be used very successfully in dogs. It comes from the resin of the same tree that frankincense essential oil comes from. Frankincense also has some anti-cancer activity, and so therefore Boswellia does as well. It's really safe in dogs. It's very safe at high doses. I typically will use a moderate dose first, so a small dog might get 250 milligrams a day. Medium-sized dog, which to me is like, Cocker Spaniel, maybe 30 pounds, would get maybe 500 milligrams per day. Larger dogs, we're looking at 1,000. And then if they do have arthritis or active inflammation, we're going to be looking at maybe 2,000 milligrams a day. Again, it is super safe for dogs. It's very safe at high doses. It's very safe for long-term use. And so if you haven't been using supplements for your senior dog, often I will recommend starting them on Boswellia and just give it for a whole month. Just give it for a month. Over that time, it will help reduce their inflammation. And then after that, you can kind of judge, do they need to continue to be on this supplement every single day? Or since they don't have cancer, maybe I'll just give them medicinal mushrooms twice a week. And so you can set up your supplementation program as you desire. But I think overall, using Boswellia on a somewhat regular basis to continue to reduce inflammation as we get older. We're all exposed to toxic chemicals and things that are going to cause inflammation in our bodies, EMFs and whatnot. And so it's just helpful to have that on board just to continue to kind of tamp down the inflammation as they continue to get older.
We all want our dogs to live forever. And the good news is that even if your dog is getting along in years, there's a lot you can do to extend that. We can't maybe get them to live forever, but we can certainly extend their life and give them a better quality of life in the process by putting some of these things into practice.